and Chief Operating Officer of Insurance Network America, and I want to begin by thanking you for attending today. We have over 400 agents on the line so far, and I'll be honest, I'm a little humbled by the attendance. We know your time is valuable, and we're going to do everything we can to be sure today's time is time well spent. You know, as I look at the list of attendees, I see some old friends on the line, and to you I say hello and thank you for your business. I also see numerous unfamiliar names. And so I hope you don't mind if I take just a couple of minutes to talk about who we are and why we're doing these webinars, so there's no misunderstanding. We are not a human resources firm, and we are not selling PPACA support. We just celebrated our 25th year as a managing general agency and independent marketing organization. In other words, we've spent 25 plus years working with independent insurance agents, helping them find suitable insurance products to meet their clients' needs, and then working hard to get that business placed and providing customer service and support after the sale. When I started at Insurance Network 20 years ago, 99% of our business was in the small group health insurance market. But like you, we've seen a lot of pressure on our business and a lot of change. So we've done what we've recommended that you do, and we've diversified our practice. We continue to be one of the largest independent employee benefits managing general agents in the country. But we're also today a premier annuity, life, and long-term care shop. We do absolutely no retail sales, which means our entire success is 100% dependent on the success of the agents we serve, which is why we spend so much time bringing you the information you need in your practice. Now, I can't start a PPACA webinar without reminding all of you what it is that we're facing and why it's such a daunting task for all of us to keep up with it, let alone stay ahead of it. Now, this graphic is now 3 years old, and the truth is that some of it has already changed, but I think the point is still made. Hundreds of new and expanded government regulations and agencies were part of PPACA, which might also explain why we're still learning what's in it. The problem is, like it or not, this is here. It's not coming, it's here. And no one from the government is out there educating the average employer about what it all means to him or her. And I know that they're turning to you for help. The problem is, we also understand how hard it is for you to find the information you need to help them. And sometimes when you do find the information, it's hard to know if it's accurate and up to date. That's why we've worked so hard to provide this to you, not only in these webinars, but in our annual producer training meetings and our individual discussions with our producers. Now, as I said, we have numerous people on the line who are not our current customers. So why did we invite you? Well, first, because we recognize that you need guidance too, and we're glad to provide it with no obligation. But also, we're hopeful that those of you who are independent insurance agents will give us a chance to earn your business. Now, today is our first in a 3-part series. Today we're going to focus primarily on the following 4 topics. In March, we've already scheduled 2 additional sessions where we'll focus on impact to employers and their benefit plans. And we'll touch a little bit on some of that today, but for the most part, we're going to talk about plan design. Can your clients keep their current plans? And if so, or if not, what will they look like? Premiums. What can your clients expect and why? We're going to give you some tools to walk your clients through what they can expect and why to help you start some discussions with your clients as well. We're going to talk about the exchanges and how they'll work in the new marketplace and a little bit about what that means to you. And we'll also spend some time talking about the individual mandate, the good, the bad, the ugly, and of course that means we're going to talk about how the subsidies work and who might qualify for them. Now, first, I want to talk about what plans will see the most change in 2014. The plan designs and the premium impact we're going to talk about are mostly applicable to non-grandfathered individual and small group plans sold inside the exchange, and in some cases, non-grandfathered individual and small group plans that will be sold outside the exchange on a fully insured chassis. Now, it's important to understand that currently in the regulation, small group is defined as 1 to 100 lives. But states are allowed to choose to limit that size to 1 to 50 employees inside the exchanges. Most that we have seen have made that choice. So for the most part, when we talk about small group, we're talking about 1 to 50 employees. In 2016, the regulations state that small group will expand all the way up to 100, and that those groups will also be able to purchase plans inside the exchange. Now, one question I get here is, grandfathered plans are those plans that were in existence at the time the law was passed and haven't had significant change since then. There's not a lot of those plans out there, but there are still some. If you have any questions about whether or not a group or an individual plan is still grandfathered, our team has a pretty good white paper on grandfathered plans that will walk you through what you need to know. And as we go through this webinar today, I'm going to make mention of some of those things that I think might be helpful. Write them down so that at the conclusion, I'll give you our phone number. You can call in and ask the team for one of those. But the white paper on grandfathered plans is one I'd suggest that you get. Now let's take a minute to look at some of the things that have already happened on non-grandfathered plans in the market today, such as no lifetime limits on essential health benefits, no annual limits on the same. Pre-existing condition clauses were removed for children under the age of 19, and we all know about the free preventive services, where insurance now must provide 100% coverage for a substantial list of preventive services with no copays, no cost sharing, and no waiting periods. We did finally get a full list of what those essential health benefits were. Recently, the government released them, and they include the following. No real surprise here. I think most of us knew these were coming. I think some of the things to point out include the fact that all plans in 2014 sold in the exchange, including individual plans, will be mandated to have maternity and newborn care, that any limits or caps on mental health and substance abuse will be removed with respect to annual and lifetime limits. Also, that pediatric care will start to include oral and vision care in your health plan. And there's still a lot of movement on trying to figure out how all of that will take place. But these are the list of essential health benefits. More significant to most plans is the restriction on plan designs that is coming for those plans that will be sold inside the exchanges beginning this fall. And yes, I said this fall. That's because the exchanges are supposed to start taking January 1st enrollees as early as October of this year. Now, for those plans, PPACA states that deductibles may not exceed $2,000 for an individual or $4,000 for a family, and that the total out-of-pocket for the plan, including those deductibles and any copays, may not exceed the annual out-of-pocket allowable under a health savings account qualified plan. So in 2013, for example, those HSA limits are $6,250 for an individual and $12,500 for a family. So all in, $62,500, including the in-network deductible of $2,000, any copays, and any coinsurance. Now, out-of-pocket for the purpose of this restriction does not include any out-of-network cost sharing, such as balance billing, premiums that somebody pays for the plan, and services that are not covered under the plan. Now, one thing to be aware of as well is that there is a catastrophic exception, and that is that a person under the age of 30 may be offered what's going to be called a TIN plan, something that would have a higher deductible and a higher out-of-pocket. And those plans may also be offered to people who would be otherwise forced to purchase unaffordable coverage. And we'll get into a little bit more of what that means shortly. Now, again, this is an area that is being currently debated. As we're sitting on this call, there are multiple organizations talking about the fact that we have some problems already because the affordability issue is becoming glaringly apparent. And what I would expect is to see a change in the requirements listed on this page. I expect that you'll, at the very minimum, see a law that comes out that states that the states, individual states, will be allowed to offer less liberal plans if their markets so dictate. I want to point out again that these changes apply only to plans sold inside the exchange. So if a group wants to keep a higher deductible that they have in place now, as long as the state that they're in allows them to, and as long as the carrier that they're with is willing to administer the plan, the group can keep that plan. Now, another huge change, perhaps one of the biggest changes to the insurance market, both inside and outside the exchanges, is that beginning in plan year starting in 2014, All fully insured individual and small group plans must provide guaranteed issue to all applicants. They must also remove all pre-existing conditions for those over age 19. Remember, they already removed them for people under age 19. In 2014, this affects any person on a plan. Now, one thing to understand is that this is as your groups renew. So if they buy a new plan January 1, 2014, these provisions will be part of it. As the groups renew in 2014, any pre-existing condition limitation would be removed for anybody on a plan. Now, this is another area of PPACA that's getting a lot of discussion. Expect to see a rule come down that allows for an annual open enrollment with a special enrollee provision, similar to what you see on HIPAA for small group today. Right now, what I'm seeing bantered around most is allowing states to employ such enrollment restrictions. But given how many states are allowing the federal government to take over their exchanges, I expect to see something happen on the federal level as well. I'll be honest, the real question I have is not whether or not they'll do it, because I expect that they will. The question I have is how are they going to create such a rule inside the IT framework of the exchanges? We'll talk more about the IT behind the scenes in the exchange, but it's going to be tricky. Regardless, I believe that there absolutely has to be such a provision in the law. Without one, particularly when you start looking at the cost increases that are anticipated, it would make no sense to buy a plan until you need one. Because to be clear, the way the law works today, you could literally buy insurance on the way to have a procedure, and the carrier would be forced to cover it. And with the penalties so low, why not? That's why there's so much discussion about this. Everyone knows that's not going to work. But still, you've got legislators out there who don't understand that this is built into the law today. They hear about the open enrollment that starts in October of this year, and they think that means all the plans have one. That's not the case. So if you're talking to your legislators, and you should be, this is something you need to be talking about. When I talk to them, this is how I present it. I ask them, if you could drop your auto insurance today, knowing that the day after you totaled your car in an accident, you could call up the carrier and buy insurance and pick the level of coverage you wanted, and the carrier would not only have to take you, but they'd have to cover your auto damages in full, wouldn't you do it? Well, that's what PPACA looks like without limited enrollment periods. So I do expect that to happen. We just have to wait and see what goes on with it. Now, additional upward pressure is going to come on the premiums from the new fees that will be imposed in the plans. And there is a lot of stuff on this slide, and I understand that. Some of what's on this screen has already started. Rather than try to go through all of these fees and costs in detail, we also have a great document available to you. It was not created by us. It was created by one of our preferred health insurance carrier partners, and it's an overview of the 4 first fees listed here and their expected impact on premiums. Those of you who really want to understand why premiums are going to skyrocket should ask us for a copy of this piece. It explains some of this. It's called the Overview of the 4 New Fees, and it covers, again, the first 4 listed here. The important thing for you to know is that it all adds up really, really fast. In fact, the 4th one on this screen, the Federally Facilitated Exchange User Fee, is expected to increase premiums on plans in the exchange by 3.5% alone. Okay, well, we've still only covered part of the picture of why you're going to see rates on your current client's coverage change in most states. As your individual and fully insured group policies renew next year, their rating structures will have to be modified to come into compliance with PPACA. These rating changes are expected to be significant in most states. That's in part because plans today in most states include discounts and loads for the factors you see on the screen now. But as you can see, those that I've driven a line through will no longer be able to be in place. So industry, employer size, health status, how long the case has been in force, claim status, what's expected next year, male, female, gender fees can no longer be part of a rate plan. Family size, tobacco use, geographic region, and to certain limit, age of an applicant are all they'll have left. Now, you might think this is a good thing, But the truth is, you have groups in your book of business right now that are benefiting from discounts in these areas. So one of the things you have to understand is you should expect significant change on your cases renewals in 2014. May come down, may go way up, but they're going to change. The last one on this list I want to talk about a little bit further, and that's the age of the applicant. Currently, 42 states have rate band restrictions on age that allow for a 5-to-1 ratio. So, for example, if a 21-year-old's premium is currently $1,200, the most that the carrier could charge to a 60-year-old would be $6,000, a 5-to-1 ratio. But on January the 1st, 2014, PPACA limits age rate bands to no more than a 3-to-1 ratio. Now you have to understand that carriers can't just lower rates by the older individuals by 40% to come into that compliance. That's because those individuals are more expensive because they cost more. So more likely what you're going to see is the carriers modify their rates to get their premium by increasing the individual's premium up to about $1,800, in other words, in this example, 50% more, while lowering those older folks by 10% to $5,220. Carriers still getting $7,200 for these two folks. They're just getting it in a different way. So again, your existing fully insured small group and individual clients, regardless of whether they're grandfathered, are going to see their rating structure modified on their first renewal on or after January 1st of 2014. Now we've seen projections on some of our carrier partners' books of business. And from what we've seen, you can expect dramatic swings on each individual case. I've seen swings as high as an 85% increase, as low, or reduction as big as 80% decrease. Now, that is just to bring them into compliance with respect to the community rating and has nothing to do with any of the other mandates or fees we've been talking about. So what I'm telling you again is that you can expect dramatic swings. The removal of all those factors, the geographic region, the tobacco use, the 3-to-1 age bands, will result in your youngest, healthiest group seeing increases that will average more than 50%. This is why we're seeing a lot of our producers talk to their clients about alternate funding platforms, where those groups can avoid many of the things we've been talking about today. In fact, many of our producers are moving these clients to those platforms this year so they can avoid that discussion next year and not have to worry about such drastic increases. Now, to start those conversations, Insurance Network has created a prospecting tool, and this graphic on the screen is actually a snapshot off of that prospecting tool. The purpose of this tool is for you to put your own contact information on it, and it explains a lot more than just this. It talks about some of the other impacts to rates. And this particular piece is designed to get a conversation going with your clients and your prospects about what they can expect from PPACA and how you're prepared to assist them going forward. If you'd like one of these documents that you can modify to include your own contact information and use as a mailer, please contact us at the end of the webinar and we'll make sure we get you an electronic version of that document. Now, as we talked about the impact on premiums, particularly to younger individuals, it's clear that in order for PPACA to work, we're going to have to find some ways to get those young people, some of whom would choose not to be covered today, to buy these more expensive policies. One way they do that is with the mandate, which states, as you read on the screen, that all U.S. citizens must have minimum essential coverage beginning in January 2014. You can see here what the penalties are, and I'm just going to let you read the screen for a sec. Now, one thing I get a lot of pushback on is whether or not an employer-sponsored plan has to meet certain requirements, and the answer is no. Any employer-sponsored plan will meet the requirement of the mandate. Okay, now I want or maybe need to take a step back for a minute because we've covered a lot of information, and quite honestly, we've covered the easy stuff so far. The remainder of this webinar gets a little bit more complex, and I have to be honest, this is probably the most difficult webinar I've ever prepared for. To make it all easy to possible as follow, I want to talk to you a little bit about the metal plans. Okay, so actuarial value requirement. Beginning with plans in 2014, non-grandfathered plans sold in the exchanges are going to have a minimum actuarial value. Now, it is one of the most complicated things out there, and again, there are some tools that I could recommend that you take a look at. One of them is a proposed actuarial value calculator. This calculator proves why it's so difficult to explain this, and unless you're a mathematics junkie, I don't recommend you even try to figure it out. But if you're a glutton for punishment, our team can get you information on how to find it. The bottom line is that despite the fact that PPACA is coming at us like a freight train, this is an area of the regulation that's still being interpreted and written. So I can't give you a lot of detail. I just want you to understand these metal plans at this point because you need to understand them before you can understand how the subsidies work. It's also important to note that the individual mandate considers an individual plan to be compliant for anyone over the age of 30 if it meets the 60% actuarial value requirement, in other words, as you see on the screen, a bronze plan. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the subsidies. And again, I know I'm going through this pretty quick. There is so much to cover here. I have got a team of people prepared to help you if you have questions once we get done with this webinar. We'll also record today's version of this webinar, and if you would like to see it again, we'll show you how to get there later. So again, based on the current legislation, an individual will be eligible for a subsidy if their family income is at or below 400% of the federal poverty level. In this graphic, we show what the federal poverty levels are in 2014. What you can see on this graphic for a family of 4 is projected to be $92,000. Now, there are several calculations that go into determining how the subsidy will work, but I'm going to give you just an example of what it looks like. It's important to understand that it's on a sliding scale, and that you're only eligible if you don't have an affordable group health plan available. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But basically, at 400% of poverty level, you're expected to pay no more than 9.5% of your household income towards a silver plan. So in this case, a family of 4 at $92,000 of household income, 9.5% of that would be $8,740, which would be expected to be your maximum premium outlay towards a silver plan. Right now, believe it or not, the silver plan is projected to cost a family $20,000 in 2014. We didn't make that number up. The Congressional Budget Office has come up with this figure. So you can see everything we talked about before is coming true in 2014. Premiums are going up. But in any event, as you look at this, $20,000 premium, $8,740 max outlay would mean that this family would be eligible for a subsidy of up to $11,260 to pay for that coverage. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about a couple of things that are causing a lot of confusion in the market. The 9.5% rule actually comes up more than once in PPACA. It comes up here where the annual amount of federal subsidy is calculated. It also comes up when talking about affordable health insurance under the pay-or-play rule for employers of 50 or more. Now, we're going to talk about this at length in the next 2 webinars, and we have so much to cover today that I don't want to go too deep into that. But I do want to make sure you have a clear understanding that there are 2 different rules, really, where the 9.5% comes into play. In order to be considered affordable to an employee, which is the qualifier or the disqualifier, if you will, for a subsidy, a silver plan, whether individual or family, must not cost the individual more than 9.5% of that individual's household income. So if that individual has access to a plan through his employer, but his contribution to the plan would exceed 9.5% of the household's income, he may be eligible for a subsidy. What's creating a lot of confusion is that there's been a lot of discussion recently about the safe harbor rule. That's where, for an employer, it states that when it comes to the employer mandate, the so-called pay-or-play provisions, the only income that counts is the employee's W-2 income, and that only the employee's contribution towards the plan's single premium would be taken into consideration. So again, that 9.5% safe harbor rule only applies to determining whether or not an employer would be subject to a penalty and has nothing to do with the employee's eligibility for a subsidy. I hope that makes sense. Let's take a look at a 200% poverty level to just kind of show you and demonstrate how this sliding scale works. At 200% poverty, a family would be expected to pay no more than 6.28% of their income towards the premium outlay. So you can see in this example that that family would qualify, same $20,000 annual premium, for a $17,000 $105 subsidy. So much bigger. Now, a couple things. As I said before, premium subsidies are based on a silver plan, those plans with the actuarial value of a 70%. So the premiums and the subsidy are based on the silver coverage, but people may be able to use that subsidy to purchase a lower premium plan with less comprehensive coverage. In other words, a bronze plan, which has an actuarial value of 60%. And again, I wish I could better explain to you the actuarial value. As I talked about in that slide, it really relates to an average population spending an average amount in a plan and has nothing to do with 60% coverage inside an individual person's plan. We'll get more information on you or out to you on that. It just was absolutely impossible. I would have needed about 30 minutes to cover that all by itself. It is important to note that there are cost-sharing subsidies as well. Anyone who receives a subsidy and purchases a silver plan can qualify for assistance to bring the actuarial value of that plan to a higher level. Now, again, the exact mechanisms for making all of this happen have not been published, so it's still unclear to me exactly how that'll work. Just like with the subsidies, how exactly does the person receive one? Well, it all depends on whether or not the exchanges do the work they're supposed to. Essentially, the way it's all supposed to work is that the reduced premiums would be collected by the exchange, and the premium subsidies would be handled by the employer and the IRS similarly to advanced earned income credit. So the money would be paid to the carriers, and it would come out of the employee's withholdings, and you can see that there is just a ton of IT work that has to be done for the exchanges because they have to be able to communicate with the Internal Revenue Service, with the carriers, and with the employers. And I'm going to just be frank with you here and tell you, I just don't see it happening in just a few short months, but we'll see. I've been proven wrong before. My gut tells me we'll see another pushback on the provision and the exchanges won't be ready. But again, that's just my personal opinion as somebody who's been involved in IT projects much less complicated than this one. Now, how the cost-sharing subsidies will work, they're expected to be paid for by the government to the health plan, who would then be responsible for administering benefits at the higher actuarial value. So somebody would buy a silver plan, but really get the benefit of a gold plan. Again, I can only imagine, if all of this is new to you right now, how your head must be spinning. Heck, mine is, and I've been studying all of this for some time, and I really wish I could make it easier to follow and to understand, but it's complicated, and it's mostly complicated because the rules haven't all been written, they haven't all been interpreted, and they haven't been published and released in such a manner that we could even study them. So as they come out, trust me, Insurance Network will continue to work on bringing this information to you in a way that makes more sense. Now, I do want to give you a tool that might help make this a little bit easier for you to explain to your clients, because I know if you tried to have them watch this webinar, they would really go nuts. The Kaiser Family Foundation has put together one of the better calculators I've seen for determining how much of a subsidy a person might expect, and also approximately what their silver plan premium might be in 2014. Now, it is not perfect, and I'm going to try to go to it, and I'll see if I mess everything up by then going back to my presentation. But here is this subsidy calculator. It is absolutely far from perfect, and you can only imagine how complex the actual calculator will have to be, is it has to take so many different values into consideration. But this one's very simple, and it does a pretty good job. Now, you'll see, for example here, there are only two choices on family type, single, family of 4. But if you were to come in here and you were to enter, a household income, an age of a policyholder, their family size, and again, you've only got two choices, no, they don't have employer coverage available, and a medium cost factor, and hit submit, it's going to come up for you and show you that we have a projected income of $45,000, which is 192% of the poverty level. This person would be eligible for a subsidy over and above 5.94% of their annual income. Therefore, they would get a tax credit of $11,574. And there's some other information here too. So again, this particular calculator, far from perfect, but it's a great conversation starter to take a look at what somebody can expect. So, oh, it worked. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of other things. As we've discussed, everything in PPACA hinges on the exchanges. And as part of the Affordable Care Act, every state must have a health insurance exchange by January of 2014. Now, the extent of these are to help individuals and small employers shop for, select, and enroll in plans. I'm going to just bring something up here real quick. I apologize. Okay, so I was going to pull up for you what the federal government said the purpose behind them was, but bottom line is they expect these to be the Expedia.com of health insurance. To the front side, we've talked about the back side and what a nightmare they could be. For the states, the thing that the states are grappling with is that they were eligible for substantial initial grants. And as long as they continue to meet progress testing requirements, they continue to get subsequent funding. But the exchanges must be fully self-sustaining by 2015. And all of the regulations have been coming to the states at such a slow pace, and the amount of money behind them is so staggering that right now 26 states have opted out and said, federal government, we'll use your exchange. Well, here's the problem. When you have a state exchange, the states make decisions about which plans can be offered inside the exchanges and at what premium. The states make decisions about how you play a role. When the federal government makes all of the decisions, all of those things are at risk. Your local regional carriers may not have an opportunity to participate, and you may not either. So these exchanges are, in my opinion, necessary to PPACA. I think they're going to be very complicated. I think they're going to be very difficult, and I think the likelihood of them being ready when they're supposed to be on October 1st is pretty slim. I think ultimately they're going to be a risk to your business, but if you have to choose one or the other, which right now you do, you have to choose a state exchange. It is the only way for you to have any input whatsoever. Let's talk about the mechanics of the exchanges. Now, whether or not you're dealing with the state or federal exchange, talked about the fact that they're going to be an IT nightmare. Let me just look at with you some of the mechanics and some of the moving parts beyond just picking a plan. So who can come in here? I mean, individual health insurance shoppers, small group health insurance shoppers, Medicaid and S-CHIP eligible individuals, and of course employees of employers. Behind that, the exchanges are supposed to determine an individual's eligibility for the subsidies for premium and their cost-sharing expenses. Somebody who is eligible for Medicaid is not only going to find that out on the exchange, but they're also going to enroll for Medicaid or enroll, if they're not, for one of the other plans. This is how there's going to be some subsidy eligibility determined and determination of whether or not employers are subject to the pay-or-play impact. If they have an employee come out here and it's determined that they have an unaffordable health plan using the safe harbor rule, if they're subject to pay or play and that employee gets a subsidy, that employer may be on the hook for a penalty. And again, we're going to cover that in the next couple of webinars. Also, this is where a small employer will be eligible to purchase a plan that's qualified for the tax credit. Today, you may have clients already receiving tax credits of up to 35%. That tax credit jumps to 50% in 2014, but the plan must be purchased in the exchange. So, you know, the exchanges are a necessary evil to PPACA, but they stand to be a pretty big threat to your business if all of your employer groups and all of your individuals go out here and purchase a plan. And that's because even though some states are saying they're going to take care of the brokers, honestly, guys, do you think they're going to pay the broker for the next 5 years when the exchanges have to be self-sustaining, when there's no longer viewed a need for the producer? I'm worried about it. You should be worried about it. And we should all continue to be diversifying our revenues as a result. All right, a couple of other things you need to understand about exchanges. Summary of benefit and coverage. These are already in place. You should already be very familiar with them. If you're not, you need to talk to whoever it is that's working with you on employee benefits. If it's our team, talk to our team. These SBCs are employer requirements. They have to follow a specific format, and there are no deviations on the template. What I think right now is getting people into trouble is not everybody knows that if an employer has a health savings account, an FSA, or an HRA, those plans have to provide separate SBCs on their renewal following September 23rd of last year. So at an insurance network, for example, we have a grandfathered plan. Even though we have a grandfathered plan, it renewed just prior to September 23rd of 2012. When we renew September 1 of 2013, we're going to have to provide an SBC because we have a health savings account where we contribute to our employees' plans. So if you're not familiar with SBCs, you need to be. But what you also need to understand is, what are these all about? Well, the reason there are SBCs is this is how they intend to take the plans and simplify them on the exchange. So every carrier plan in the exchange is going to have a summary of benefit and coverage for their bronze plan, their silver plan, their gold plan, and this is how an employee or an individual is supposed to be able to determine and compare not only the actuarial value, but the basic benefits covered under the plan. What's the copay? How does it work for prescriptions? How do they work for certain diabetes-type treatment? These SBCs right now have to be provided at sometimes at time of initial proposal. So if you're not talking to your employer groups about SBCs when you're enrolling them for a new plan, you really need to be doing that. If you're doing self-funded plans, it's important you talk to the TPA and find out who's going to do it, because in a fully insured market, the fully insured carriers are providing the SBCs. In the self-funded market, it's really the employer because they're the plan sponsor, just like they're the plan sponsor of an HSA or an HRA, and so the onus falls on them. Now, the carriers that we work with and the TPAs we work with on the self-funded market are also providing SBCs. It's just an important question to ask of whoever it is you're out there talking to. Now, we are quickly running up against 40 minutes, and I want to give time for Q&A. So a couple of things. On your screen, there's an opportunity for you to ask questions, and I'm going to try to get to some of those. So if you've got some questions, you can type them in and we'll bring them over and we'll do our best to answer some of those questions for you. But I'm also going to, at the end of this, give you a phone number you can call where you can directly talk to any one of our specialists here at the office. But first, I want to try to tie it all together for you and really talk about what it is that you need to know right now. So, deep breath. Clients on existing plans may keep them as long as the state you're in doesn't mandate otherwise, but you do need to know, regardless of the fact that you can keep the plan you have, those plans will be subject to the new community rating rules, so their rates will change, and depending on the state you live in, most likely they will change dramatically. You've got to stay ahead of that curve. If you're not talking to your clients about what they can expect in 2014, somebody else will be, and you're likely to lose those clients. So don't do that. Get in front of this. Also, those who choose to purchase plans in the exchange will most likely be subject to many additional plan restrictions that will result in even higher premiums. And right now, most projections are that those subsidies may or may not make up the difference. So a lot of us are afraid of the exchange. We're afraid of everybody running to it. But frankly, if the exchanges only offer very expensive, very restrictive plans, you may not see the exodus that you anticipate on your fully insured books of business for your small groups. However, you do need to be talking to them about if it does impact them, and if so, how can you help them avoid some of the things we talked about today. Third bullet here, a state exchange is better than a federal one, but both put your business at risk in the future if you don't adapt. You have to understand that. You're naive if you don't. And I see a lot of insurance agents out there saying, hey, but they told me they were going to include me. And I just, as somebody who is an insider in this business, I want to warn you, I do not believe that is a long-term strategy for the exchange plans. I think with all the MLR pressure that are on the carriers, with all of the new restrictions, with all of the new rules, coupled with the fact that eventually they're not going to need you to drive people to the exchange, I think you're at risk. So be diversifying your business now. Be more consultative in your approach. You can't just be presenting a spreadsheet approach to your clients anymore. If you are, and I don't think those of you who are on the line are in that type of mode, but if you are, you have to stop it, because those are the insurance agents that unfortunately are going to be out of business. And overall, what's going to happen with PPACA? Well, time will tell. You just can't be a bystander. And like I said, we've got several hundred people on the line today that are doing their best not to be bystanders. Continue to participate. I'm going to swing out here and answer a few questions if I can, and then probably spend about 5 minutes doing that. One of the things I want you to understand is our manager of employee benefits, Mike Dibben, here in our office, is extremely competent in understanding PPACA regulations, so he can help you. We have a team of experts. Many of you are already working with somebody in our office, Justin, Daryl, Darren, Bo. Those folks, absolutely competent and prepared to help you, and we'll throw our number up here in a minute for those of you who aren't familiar with them. But let me just try to take a few questions and see if there is something that I can answer for you. Oh my goodness. Okay. What is the number I can call? I'll give that to you. Craig, should I use a gun or a rope? I'm sorry. I wish it were easier. I got asked that. I did an employer webinar not too long ago, and I did it for a group of small employers, and I got to the end, and they said, oh my goodness, could you have told us anything good? This is depressing. And I just had to remind them, don't shoot the messenger. I think the important thing to understand, though, is as bad as this sounds, it is the reality. I'm not trying to paint a bad picture. It is the reality. The reality also is that there are things you can do to help your employer groups prepare, and there are things you can do to make sure that your practice is actually better than ever. So we'll get that out there. So let's see. I see a lot of questions out here that relate to employer groups. I'm going to push those questions off the best I can because we have 2 more webinars coming up in the next 3 weeks that are going to cover those specifically. But please keep typing your questions because I'll make sure that we incorporate those into the PowerPoints that we do. All right, can you get copies of the slides? I hope you understand that we can't give you a copy of the presentation. We can give you copies of some of the materials we discussed. We will record this session. It will be on our website. You can go back and review it again. If there are certain things you'd like copies of, certain pages out of here, my team can absolutely get that to you. Okay, let's see. The higher deductible amounts outside the exchange being allowed, has that changed? Previously it stated it applied to both in and out of the exchange for small groups and individuals. That depends. Inside the exchange, absolutely not. Inside the exchange, right now, the deductible limits I showed you are the deductible limits. outside of the exchanges, the states are allowed to make those decisions. And again, I do expect to see some changes with respect to what happens on the, I expect to see some changes with respect to what happens on inside the exchange. Okay. What is the definition of an affordable group health plan? The definition of an affordable group health plan is one that does not exceed 9.5% of your household income. That's the rule. 9.5% of your household income as it applies to the Silver plan. Okay, you say that the $2,000 deductible and $6,250 maximum out-of-pocket applies only to exchange-based plans. That conflicts what I've been told. Who says it will apply to in and out, which is correct? Here's the deal. Right now, it is absolutely all the plans inside the exchange, and the carrier rep who told you that is probably telling you that you have, if you're offering plans outside the exchange, you have to offer plans that mirror those inside the exchange, but you can also offer other plans. So, got to have one in the exchange that meets the requirements, outside the plan that meets the requirements, but that doesn't preclude you from also offering some outside. So if a person purchases a metal plan on the exchange and qualifies for a subsidy, they receive it in the form of a tax credit. They still have to pay the full cost of the plan up front. Steve, the answer to that is no, they would not. That would be handled within the exchange. And then there is a true-up that would happen with their taxes and with their employer over the course of the year. So somebody talked about, I'm unclear about what small group plans are going to allow. Will they have to offer no more than a $2,000 deductible inside the exchange? That's correct. Inside the exchange, the way it stands now, and remember that a small group can only get that if they go to the exchange to get the, I'm sorry, I was reading a question and I shouldn't have been. They can only get that if in fact they want the tax credit rather, they have to go to the exchange, so then they would be limited to that. Let me really quickly throw this up on the screen because I see people leaving and I want you to have the phone number. We're here to help you. If you want any of the pieces mentioned in today's webinar, if you need assistance with any prospects or clients you have, there's our phone number. Also, be sure to sign up for our next two sessions. We've got one coming up on Tuesday, March 12th, where we're going to talk about the PPACA impact on the small employer. And on March 21st, we're going to talk about one with the pay-or-play mandate, what's next, what to expect. I do want to tell you I'm sorry that I know I went through some of this really, really fast. And I wish there were a better way. As I started to put all of this together, I realized I really probably should have done today's session in two separate 40-minute webinars. We may come back out and do that. But you don't have to wait for another webinar to get your questions answered or to reach out for guidance. I have a great team behind me that has all of the information that you need to navigate this crazy time. I wish I could make it easy. The problem with making it easy is our federal government isn't making it easy. So with that, we have got a, we're right up on the 50-minute mark. I'm not going to be able to get to the rest of the questions. We do have them captured, though, and we will try to reach out to you on an individual basis to answer them where we can. So again, I want to thank you for your time. I know it's valuable. I know this was a lot of information, and I'm going to try very hard to make it easier when we get into our next two sessions. This was, as I said, probably the hardest webinar I've ever prepared for. Way too much information, not enough time to give it to you, and very complicated information. But we've got some great pieces to help bring it all together. If you just reach out to our office, we'd be happy to help.